Welcome to Work in Progress, a podcast series where I pick the brain of thought leaders within the field of people and culture. My name is Pernille Brun, and in these talks we explore the latest trends shaping the future of work and the evolving landscape of modern organizations. Today I'm speaking with business psychologist and consultant Dion Sørensen, who has previously held positions within HR and people and culture in companies such as Danish Commodities, Saxo Bank and Maersk. Dion is also the author of several books on talent management and clear leadership. All right, Dion, here we are. It's good to meet you. Likewise. We are sitting in Copenhagen to do this podcast episode. And the headline was something in the line of how to best bring talent to play, ensure high performance, and how HR can help. So the reason why I invited you today as a guest speaker in this podcast episode is because you work with talent, you work with leadership, you work with how to best bring the best out of people in general, and you have a background within HR, but you are also educated within business psychology, right? Yeah. So I found your profile interesting, and then I read your book, Take the Lead, You Are in Charge, which inspired me a lot. So I've been looking very much forward to meeting you, and I would love if you would give a few words about who are you?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I really look forward to this, and thank you for reading my book that I wrote together with Henrik Lind. And I'm also, of course, glad that you liked it. My background, I am a business psychologist and a graduate diploma in finance. And I started my life in consultancy. My very first job was in a large consultancy firm. And then I sort of moved into corporate HR for quite some years. I was in Maersk, I was also in Danske Bank, and I was also heading up the HR function in Saxo Bank. And then I had a period again in my life where I was an independent consultant. And one of the big clients I had was Danske Commodities, and that relationship evolved quite quickly, especially my relationship with Henrik Lind, who founded the company. And I started becoming part of the board of directors, and later I was sort of heading the HR function, which I did for 6 years. And then in 2020, I went back out into the consultancy world, and I've been doing that for the last 5 years. So summing up, I have been obviously working in HR. I've been a leader myself, and I'm also a consultant where I try to help others to not make the same mistakes that I have made, which of course is quite an effort, but that's my ambition.
Awesome.
Yes.
So what a journey. So in and out of different roles and transitions, and what has this given you in terms of experience of being able to actually advise HR professionals or P&C and culture and managers in general?
I like to believe that it gives me an advantage that I have been sitting on their side of the table. I know the challenges from within that they face in an organization. I was also very early in my career one of those top 100 talents by Berlingske due to some of the stuff I did in Saxo Bank. So I also know what it does to a person to be labeled a talent and what challenges that can actually give also to an organization. And I try to merge my own experience being a leader, being an HR professional, and also a young, passionate professional, whatever we call it. And I try to sort of bring that together in the work I do today, where I try to just help other companies, leaders, do the best they can. So that's sort of that's at least my ambition with the stuff that I do, to connect the dots and help others succeed.
So, and maybe I'm quick jumping into it, but what you mentioned that it can give companies some trouble, that some of their people are named or labeled biggest talent, blah, 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 and others are not. Is that where the problem lies? Or
I think part of some challenges with that whole concept of being a talent, because the worst thing you can do to a person is to remove the burning platform, to do your best to grow, to be vulnerable and humble. And sort of getting that stamp in your forehead that you are a talent at a very young age can sometimes derail your focus a little bit, and sort of think that now I got it, and now I need to tell other people what to do in order to keep making me happy and make me succeed with my ambition. So And I think as a consequence of all this, I also think that these sort of traditional talent programs are sort of moving a bit away in favor of a more inclusive approach, where you try to acknowledge that everyone has potential to become better, and we should do whatever we can to make that happen, rather than having that selected few 2% that are sort of the super role models and everyone else should really watch and learn. I have tried these programs many times myself, and often they give a lot of challenges actually to companies, because the ones that are in the program think too highly of themselves, and the ones that are not get super jealous, and they think, why the hell am I not part of this? And then they, for that reason alone, could decide to resign, or at least become very disengaged or dissatisfied.
That's an interesting approach to and based on your own experience, of course. Yeah. So did it kill your curiosity, or did you for a period of your life become a little bit more like you knew it all? Or
I think I had a period in my life. I was 31 when I got this label, and I was heading up the HR team in Saxo Bank at that time. And I think it got me to reflect a lot, how I made it there and what I could still do. And I like to believe that I tried to keep my feet on the ground and focus on the job. But there's no doubt when I first got it, I was super proud and happy. And I think like many others, of course, to some extent, maybe also in times coming to the conclusion that I knew better than others, which I shouldn't, that were clearly more experienced, more advanced than me in some aspects. So I think whenever you do this, you need to do it with, you need to make sure that these young individuals know that, this is the first step on your journey. There's a lot of steps. You still have a lot to learn. Yeah. Congratulations, you got a good start, but don't give up and don't give in, because then it will all end.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Does that make sense?
It totally does. Yeah. And it gave you a stepping stone to actually build better talent programs, it sounds like, internally in the organizations you were part of. Yes. So you said it has transitioned lately into something more inclusive, or where you think differently about it. Can you explain to us a little bit better what you mean by that, and what is the transition?
I think the trend today is to open up a bit more, and also to say, well, basically we believe everyone has potential to grow and to learn. Maybe some faster and more than others. That's fine. Of course, there are differences, but let's try to explore how can we make everyone better? How can we give everyone an opportunity to grow? So rather than sending 10 people on a talent program, let's roll an individual development plan out in the organization. Let's empower managers to have that conversation, to find out what is your aspiration, how can I nurture it, and then find some ways to grow and learn on the job. And then you may add a few programs along. It's not to kill programs at all. I really think they can do a big difference, but it needs to be targeted to the individual in terms of what is his or her career aspirations and potential, rather than sort of like, you are fantastic, let's just meet and tell each other that, and that's basically the main purpose. Because I think that's probably a little bit going away, which I think is for the better.
It's for the better. And then it also sounds like it's about enabling managers or leaders to take those conversations with the individuals, for sure, at every level and at every potential.
I agree. Very much. I think also another challenge with some of these programs is that you send people out without the organization fully being prepared to get them back in, and they don't really know what they learned. They come back filled with energy, but they can be a little bit derailed in their focus. Maybe they learned some tools, some hacks by some great consultants, and now they need to come back in and sort of apply it in everyday work. And if their own manager, their own team doesn't know about it, doesn't embrace it, then sometimes it can be a little bit detached, right? So rather than doing that, try to integrate it into the way the managers work, and basically empower them and make sure that they are the ones in charge together with the individual to drive that development. Because that way you can get work done while developing an employee through some challenging tasks and interesting projects, rather than sending them off to very expensive courses with some great consultants who learn them tips and tricks, which may be relevant, but sometimes can be a little bit generic, a little bit theoretical, if you don't manage to at least embed it. I think that piece needs to be there. And that is not always the case. That's at least my experience.
Your experience, yeah. So what happened to you after you were named the talent and you came back? And were you part of like a program, or did you yourself, or did you actually...
I was actually, at the time, I was heading very early, I sort of managed to get in the position of heading the HR team in Saxo. So I was really stretched in that role. So there was a lot on my plate. So I didn't really have time or prioritize any kind of programs. I was included in an alumni program with Berlingske, which they did. But other than that, I was running most of the talent programs we did in the bank at the time. So I think I didn't have the chance to get sort of derailed in any way. But I was reflecting on some of the alumni programs that we did with Berlingske that I would like to avoid that happening in the... There was also a lot of great stuff, but there was some of the things where I felt it was a little bit...
It was detached.
Yeah, detached a little bit, which I think at the end of the day is very important to ensure that you get something out of it that you embed it in the everyday work, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So after Saxo Bank, was that when you joined Danish Commodities, or?
After Saxo Bank, I wrote my first 2 books in Saxo. The first one called The Talent Factory, which was based on actually why I got into that Talent 100 thing, because we were growing so fast, we could not find the leaders we needed externally, so we needed to grow them internally, and we sort of developed a concept of sort of growing systematically our top talent into leaders from within. And following that high growth period, we sort of hit a bit of a wall at a time where we needed to consolidate and cut cost. And I was part of driving a significant round of layoffs, basically, and restructuring, which inspired me to write my second book, which was called Crisis Management, or sort of how to adjust your workforce. So those were 2 very different books about sort of growing talent, growing organizations, and how to then clean up when you sort of went too fast in one direction. And at the time, to be completely honest, right, the HR function after that process that I was running myself was very, very lean and very much focused on the operational administrative piece. And I sort of felt it was time for me to do something else. So I actually went back out into being a consultant, and I got a few people that contacted me on sort of, can you come do some pitches around the books, and also some of my old clients. So I felt, hell, I'll do it.
Yes.
And so I went back out, and after a very short period of time, I was contacted by Henrik Lind, who knew both Kim and Lars from Saxo Bank, and he read this book, Talent Factory, and that was sort of the phase that Danske Commodity was in, and he was like, could you come in and help us facilitate this process? So that was how it all sort of happened at the time. Yeah.
So it was high growth leading to the Talent Factory book, and then it was kind of a consolidation and stuff that led to the second book. So in Danish Commodities, could you then, and I guess you could, but take the learnings from there and then combine them? Or is that even possible? Or is this just something that all companies face?
Yeah, I wish I could say I learned from it, right? But actually the exact same thing happened, right? We really utilized the talent management piece and the growth piece, but we also ended up in a situation where we were basically following each chapter in the crisis management book, where we also had to clean up. And that actually happened just about half a year after I joined. I needed to go into that process and sort of cleaning up the thing before we could go back into a growth phase.
And what were the signs? What made you, look at it from that perspective rather than just growth?
Yeah, I think I also have a graduate diploma in finance. So, and when the cost starts growing more than the revenue, that's a bit of a red flag you need to be mindful of. And sometimes there's good reasons to really grow and ramp up with resources at a certain point, but many things can happen that can change the market conditions or the demand for your services. And for that reason, every once in a while, you need to sort of loosen up on the speeder and maybe put a little bit on the brake. And for many companies, at least I've been part of, when you're so enthusiastic and nothing could go wrong, sometimes it can take a little long to come to the conclusion, well, we actually need to go into another direction or slow down a little bit. And for that reason, sometimes it comes too late, and then it becomes a bit of a tough break or tough stop, which happened both at Saxo and Danske Commodities, actually. But in both cases, it led to a very good basis to continue the growth following that cleanup. And I think, having thought about it, of course, I wish I saw the signs on the wall early on, to be honest. But I also think sometimes it needs to happen. You need to go through these organizational phases, and you need to do what's needed. And the best, like Jack Welch says, change before you have to. I don't know if you ever saw that quote. I love it, right? Yes. So ideally, you need to do something before it's really critical. And I think in both cases we did. Should we have done it a little earlier?
So when you were discovering that and coming back to Henrik and the rest of the C-suite there and advising on, let's slow down a little bit, and they probably saw it too, but what was it you want? What's in that chapter of the crisis management book that you advise on then? Yeah. Is that to in terms of what HR does in that phase? Yeah, I think in that phase of sort of doing the change or sort of conducting the layoffs and so forth, it's a very straightforward process, really. It's not difficult to do that. I did write the book about it because I think there are some things you need to be mindful of so that you take good care of the people, because you need an organization and a leader should be judged by how do you treat people in times of difficulty, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure you handle it in a good way. And I think some of the things I've been part of, I was not super proud of. I would like to do it differently. And that's why I sat down and wrote that book about how do you make sure to have that sort of human touch in the way when you let people go. Do it in a good way. But I think... And what is a good way?
A good way is to make sure that you face people, in person. You explain them, why are you doing this? So they understand. You don't give them some crappy, generic ChatGPT generated. That was not ChatGPT at the time, but it has to be something that people can buy into, so they can relate to, they understand it. And then you need to take care of them afterwards so they can get on with their lives. You need to pay them so they can go out and get the necessary outplacement services and support. And you need to make sure that there's a good, proper offboarding where they can, say goodbye to their team, make sure that there's time to leave and so forth. All that kind of things where sometimes it's too sterile the way it's being done. You sort of treat people a little bit like a number in an Excel sheet, right? So there are things there that I have been reflecting on in the way we have done it. But what I wanted to say is I think the most challenging piece is actually what comes after. And I think sometimes you forget the people that are left because you're so focused on you sort of taking care of the people who is getting out, and you neglect the people who have actually lost a great colleague and who was a little bit going back to the drawing board in terms of what should we really be doing now, and maybe a little bit confused or frustrated about what's going on. Or
afraid of their own position.
Afraid of their own position, for sure, right? So reinstalling that comfort, that faith, seeing the strategy and understanding this is going to be fantastic, even though some of my great colleagues are not around anymore. I think that's really important. So to rebuild the structure or the culture so that people really buy into it and feel that this is still a great organization. And I have yet to see any leaders who have regretted actually going through some of these changes. Typically it's a relief if you manage to current people in a proper way. I've more often come across people who are leaders who wait too long. And then it's again back to the change before you have to. Sometimes we drag it out and we really need to be 100% sure to do it. But very often we are quite sure that this is the end of the road. We need to part ways. We need to do something now. Yeah. But for various reasons, being a little bit conflict averse or afraid to hurt people's feelings, maybe we drag it out too far, right? But,
and it's a very interesting link between talent management and how you bring talent to play in an organization, and then having those hard conversations, being able to let people go in a good way, and do crisis management well. What is the link to those of us who might have trouble seeing the link there?
Yes, I think what is important, and that's also the reason we called the book Take the Lead, You're in Charge. I think it's important that people make up their mind when they go into this. Is this something I want to do? Because being a leader, that may look good in terms of title, status, power, and all that, but there's so much associated with being a leader that is also uncomfortable at times. You need to step in, make tough decisions. You need sometimes to give people a hard feedback. You need to go in and resolve a conflict, make unpopular decisions, maybe even decisions you don't completely agree with yourself. You need to stand by it. You need to front your people. And all that, I think many people forget or they don't think about when they step into it. They just think it's great with a small raise and a great title, and now we all together we're gonna have a fantastic
it looks
time
great
together.
On my CV
exactly right. And then they go into with a bit of a naive attitude about what does this really mean. And the reason we called the book "Take the Lead, You're in Charge" is because if we really cut into the sort of the essence of the people who were really standing out on the good side, but also the people who fell short. It was really about that, taking that responsibility, you know, sit yourself at the end of the table and be a leader. If you cannot do that, if you're not comfortable doing that, it will be difficult for you, and it will be super difficult for your employees.
Yes.
And I think that's don't fall into the trap of being sort of a one-trick pony who can only praise, or who can only ask questions, or who can only, whatever thing you can do. You really need to be able to play all the piano strings, right, in order to fulfill the role. So I think you should be able to handle a change. You should be able to handle a crisis. You should be able to, of course, engage and encourage and empower people so they feel this is a fantastic place to be. You should be able to do all of this. So it's a very... I think one point of the book is that it's not complicated, but it's very demanding to be a leader.
Yes.
It's a big responsibility, and you have to carry it, right? Otherwise, you should not be a leader. No. And I don't think leadership is for everyone.
No.
That's clear.
No, it sounds like you have a good recipe for what it takes to actually succeed in that role, and that's what you're talking about. So do you have an example of a manager or an organization that actually did apply some of these advice that you give to organizations?
One of the quotes, the sort of the bold quotes we have in the book is, you probably know Drucker. He has this culture eat strategy for breakfast, and the quote that we use for the last chapter in the book, which is the shortest, by the way, is that leadership cooks culture for dinner, which is a little bit taggy, I know, right? But anyway, the point is that if you have great leadership, you can shape the culture accordingly. And a good example of that, I think, it was last year. I was contacted by a close client of mine who was really frustrated about the meeting culture being so terrible in his leadership team and actually throughout the organization. It was like a mid-sized organization, and he wanted my help to make some guidelines for good meetings. And I was a little bit skeptic. I was very skeptic. I never think you can drive any kind of change by writing anything down. So I actually told him that I thought we could do the guidelines, but that should be for his reference. Then what I would suggest him to do is to do three things, and then I would almost promise him that he could skip the rules on the walls. The one thing would be to be very clear to the team that he was not happy with the meeting culture right now and what he wanted. So show up on time, leave your phone closed, be present, don't run in and out when we have our meetings. That's number one, set clear expectations. Number two, be a role model yourself. You have to do it yourself, because when I asked him, are you always on time? Not always. And it's always the fish rots from the top, right? Or from the head. And so be a role model yourself, really, really step up and be there on time and follow these rules yourself. And then make sure to give the feedback when people show up late. Also, when they show up on time, make sure that it matters, that it counts, that you tell them that this is fantastic. And if it isn't, let them know. If you do that, if you just follow these three rules, I'm pretty comfortable that you will.
You don't need your 10 points.
You don't need your 10 points on the wall. And then actually 3 months later, he called me and he said, "Thank you, thank you for these 3 easy hacks." Yes. And he also told me we actually reduced the meetings. We don't have as many meetings. We don't have them as long anymore, because now all of a sudden we can start on time. We can be super efficient, and we managed to get much more done in our meetings than we did before. And I'm not sharing this example to tell you, see how great I am. I'm really sharing it to share how efficient it is if you just set clear expectations. If you're a role model, if you give that feedback, if you do that consistently, and if everyone does that, you can really drive cultural change and you can make a lot of things happen. So I think that's the nutshell of people management, if you ask me.
And then if we ask ourselves, why do not more managers just apply those hacks? It might come down to conflict avoidance or being a little bit,
the conflict avoidance and the role model piece. And because I also sometimes meet leaders who want to embed a big change, and then I typically ask them, are you willing to front this? Are you willing to do it? Because it's great you want everyone to be in the office every day, but are you in the office every day? Are you setting that example? And in terms of feedback, it's great that you want feedback and you want people to give each other feedback. Do you do it? Do you role model that? So don't set higher expectations than what you can do yourself, because then it will fail.
So the link to talent management is also that it's managers are leading that talent and also assembling the force for good for the business in a way where it plays out well. So your connection, or the connection I make from what you're saying here, is that talent can do something, or having that label can do something to people that can be beneficial or not. Yeah. And it's the manager's responsibility to make sure that everyone seen as a talent or see themselves as a talent. Is that correct? And then how you then put it to play?
100% sure, and so I think it's important that's another thing with the HR team, is that they empower the managers actually to be managers. They don't go in and take over there. The managers need to fulfill these requirements, and the way you do it really is to hire people with the right attitude, right? People who want to go in and make a difference. And there is this another quote, hire for attitude and train for skills, which I know you've heard it many times before, but I kind of like it because it emphasizes the fact that if you have people with the right attitude, the right spirit, you can train, you can qualify, you can get those bits and pieces that they need to do on a professional side. Yeah. And if you get those people on board, you treat them well, you set a clear direction, give them the praise, the comfort, the empowerment that they need, you support them in their both professional and personal development, then you will not only have great results in your team, you'll also contribute to a great culture. Because at the end of the day, in my mind, the culture is the consequence of what people do, especially the leaders. So if all leaders are able to do this and be role models of that way of leading and ensuring that people think this is a fantastic place to be and I can really make the most out of myself and what I do, that's basically a good
recipe for success.
That's the recipe for success, right? But if you have people who don't have that attitude, and you have managers who are afraid to set that direction, to step in and deal with those challenging situations, having those tough conversations, then you will have conflicts that will just sort of become bigger and bigger, and there will lots of difficult situations that are not dealt with, and that will hold you back from really being excellent. Yeah. And that's just a pity.
So I hear that it's a lot about the right mindset. But then once you have those top-notch people that you've been looking for and you hire them, how do you then ensure that they actually become successful in their roles?
Yes, it's a good question, because you can actually have people who are very successful in one context, and then when they go to another, something happens, right? Which is also why it's good to develop talent from within, because that way the mindset, the cultural fit is there. It's always a bit of a chance when you hire people externally. So unless you want to have a huge change or you don't have the talent in-house, of course, you should look externally. I do have experience with a few of the clients I work with where they really go for the very best people in the market, and they pay a big amount to really get some hot shots in. But sometimes there's also a bit of a pattern of that not really working out as great when they then come into their organizations as these individuals were doing in the past. And I think this is really an opportunity for a company to look yourself in the mirror. If you have a pattern of bringing in great people on paper, you do the reference checks, they have been doing good in their previous companies, you pay them a lot, you do all the good things or the right things, you bring them in, and for some reason they don't make it. If that's a pattern, it's very... The only reason I can think of is that there's something about your way of doing things. There's something about your structure, your culture, your leadership philosophy that does not really work. And rather than turning into a blaming these individuals for not being great anymore, or sort of they clearly topped 5 years ago, or they're not as good as they looked, whatever. You should take it as an opportunity to reassess yourself, to think about, is there something in the way we are setting expectations that are not super clear, or did we not do the proper work when we onboarded the individual, or are we not creating a context of clarity and, possibility to deliver? And then you should change it accordingly. Because if you hire hotshots, as you say, and you don't give them a mandate, if you don't give them sort of the possibility to perform, to use all their talents, even the greatest individual can turn into a major failure. And that's unfortunately what happens sometimes if that proper preparation is not being done.
And what you're saying is actually, so talent management starts with management and with leaders.
100%. It starts and stops with leaders, right?
Yeah.
Because the leaders need to empower and embrace, and then it sounds like they need to do the job, because it's and that's not really the case. You need to get people who also want to run. Of course, you need to give them direction. You need to adjust a little bit. Like, I think the example in the book is like a GPS or a navigation system in the book. So you need to nudge people a little bit to make sure that they go on with their stuff. But really, you need to get out of their way, right? To make sure that they can strive, they can learn, they can grow, and then help them as much as you can. But without becoming a micromanager, right? Because you don't want to go in and avoid or limit people in sort of realizing their full potential. But the worst kind of management is laissez-faire management, or managers who are not around, who don't prioritize their people, who don't set clear expectations, who don't follow up because they're so busy with meetings, running from one meeting to another, flying around the world. That's the worst managers ever, right? They should not be managers. They should just be sort of executive advisors or whatever, meeting participants or whatever, because that has nothing to do with leadership.
No, and it also sounds like not only not having the time, but also not taking the time to dare to sit there when you are needed. And tell us your story about Danish Commodities. So you said it was 10 years journey, and it was a successful transition, and something great came out of it. Can you tell us what happened and what led you to write the book?
I think one of the main reasons that it has been such a successful case, and it also continued to be successful after both Henrik and I left, is really due to Henrik's mindset around sort of what is also captured in the book. You need to want to do something. You need to be ambitious as a leader, and you need to communicate that. You need to enforce that and empower people to deliver. And he was a perfect role model himself. He sort of did this, and he demanded also that the leaders should do it. And he was not afraid to invest in qualifying the leaders to actually live up to these sort of expectations, help them, support them. Because the main philosophy was that if we have strong leaders who do this consistently, then we will be able to build a strong culture. We were also located very close to one of the best universities of finance students in Denmark, which is Aarhus University. So we also were based on talent factory. We were very keen on bringing in the sharpest minds from the university while they were still studying, and then incorporating them or integrating them into the business as they graduated. So having those young people and sort of grooming them, developing them into and being able to foster that mindset that we wanted, I think that was a big part of the success.
And it sounds like it was very deliberate. You had almost an image or a vivid picture in your minds about what does great look like in terms of management and leadership.
Exactly. Yeah, it did. It was very much what you can read in the book. That's really because we wrote it right after we left in 2020, and then we sort of let's put it together what we really did. And I think it was not so clearly articulated before, but it was very clear in the way we worked that this is what we want and this is what we are looking for. So when we were hiring managers, when we were onboarding them, when we were training them, it was very much around these principles. And the same when we hired young professionals and employees, what we looked for was really this fire in the eyes, this passion, this wanting to do something, while still being able to collaborate, and be part of a team, because you can also have some people, I know it's not a politically correct word, but I think I call them brilliant assholes, right? Who are really great, good performers, right? They can make money on trading floor, but they can just not make it work with other people, right? And you cannot have those individuals around. So we were also very
And maybe can you put a few words on why? Because some people might know, but others might still be, but still they add value, and So why is it you say it so clearly?
I think it's so important because it's really the signal you send as a leadership team. If you accept that, if you say, okay, he makes money, but he's an asshole, the rest will not be happy working with him. He does not create a great work spirit or working culture. Then you also say money is more important than the culture or the people that we have. And at the end of the day, that will cost you much more than taking that individual out and saying, he was really good financially, but he did not live up to our values. So we need to deal with it, right? Of course, you should give people a chance, and most people can be corrected. But this is really something, and I am a psychologist, and I really look careful for this psychopath element when I hire people, because you can see it if you test properly. You can sort of sense, and if you do the references properly, you can find out, is there a bit of a history here? Is there a dark side or a sort of some blind spots that the person is not mindful of? And that is just toxic for a culture, right? You really
what kind of questions do you ask that might give you a hint?
Yeah,
other than when
was the last time when you were really under pressure, when you really faced a challenge that you had to cope with? And the first thing I don't want to hear is that never happened to me. I've been fortunate enough to never be in a conflict or in a crisis or in a challenge, right?
That's a red flag.
Exactly. And then afterwards, how did you deal with it? Was it like all the other people that were just idiots and you want to come out as sort of the number one, or you were doing great or whatever? That's another red flag. So there are a few red flags. Can you reflect on yourself? Do you have a bit of humbleness, humility, in the way you see yourself, or do you just feel that you're sort of you're the shit, right?
Yes.
And everyone else is just a little bit off. Yeah. So there's a few things that you can do, and then of course you are a psychologist as well. You can also test for different traits in your personality, right? And that's also why I think we were so focused, and we also did that in Saxo Bank, by the way, including people very young, where you can still mold them, you can still structure them, and then get those very, very strong senior experienced people in who can sort of lead and guide and direct. But when we hired those individuals, the leaders, it was also a very clear requirement that it's great that you want to lead, it's great that you are so experienced and qualified in your field, but please acknowledge that about 25% of your time you need to help others. You need to teach others, you need to be a mentor, you need to empower, you need to onboard and so forth. That's part of being a senior person in this company. And if they don't want to do that, then you cannot be a leader, because that's really part of it.
Yeah.
And then you can end up in a situation where they're sort of working a bit on their own, or they're running from meeting to meeting. They don't embrace, they don't empower the part of their role being an educator, an aspiration for others, learning, teaching.
Yes.
Because when you have a lot of young people, which we did in Danske Commodities, with lots of energy, lots of spirit, they just want to go out there and do something. If you don't have someone who can set that direction, who can help them run in the right direction, it will just be a car crash. So you need those people, and they need to prioritize that task as sort of probably the most important thing in their leadership role.
And what if you, in your HR function, discovers that you don't have that kind of leadership or management around you, but you have a willingness from the CEO or from maybe the C-suite that they want to grow this kind of nurture this kind of culture? Yeah. Where do you start? What do you do?
I think you start by articulating that this is important, and also making sort of a target profile for this is what good looks like. And then you need to find out, of course, are people willing, open to go down that route? Because if they are, perfect, we can make it happen, we will support you. If they're not, we need to think about, is this the right role, or should we do something else? And then you can do a lot with training, with teaching, with coaching, sort of going through the different tools, the different hacks, how to sort of build this mindset, this way of working. And then make sure that, in the recruitment strategy that you build, you bring on board someone who's representing the same kind of mindset, because that way makes it easier to integrate them into the culture.
Yeah. So articulating it, being very vocal about this is what great looks like and where we should be, but this is the current state, which looks very different. So
this is the gap. We need to close it. Exactly. This is what we will do, and also helping people close that gap, because if they're really open to it and they want to do it, I think it will also be a massive failure if the company is not able to qualify and help them, right?
True.
Especially if you're going through a change where you say, okay, we wanted this, now we want this. Then you need to try your best to help people get there, of course.
Yes.
I think there is something in our society right now going on where we are a little bit hesitant to acknowledge that is needed at times. But you need to be able to and comfortable going in sometimes and say something, do something that people don't at first appreciate or find comfortable, that they think this is not the direction I will go. Can I not work from home 3 days a week? I don't really like that. Or do I need to change my seat? Or do I need to prioritize this and not that? People may not like it at first, but you need to do it anyway if that's the strategy, if that's what's needed. And you need to live with that, not being, the most popular guy around for every day in the office.
Which you won't be if you do exactly that.
Exactly, right? Because the problem is also if you don't take these calls, if you don't go in, then they tend to build up, they tend to get bigger, and which is also why you need to deal with it very soon, very early, and then you can sort of get through it without it becoming a massive deal most of the time.
So actually, based on your experience, that growing the talent across the entire organization starts with the managers being able to actually grow it and not sending them on programs. That one conclusion you made, right? Another sounds like it's also about training, a lot about equipping those managers with the skills to actually take the hard conversations, but also being authoritarian when needed, or more direct, we could also call it. And then at other times asking questions. And how do you teach that? Where do you start as HR in order to help the organization embrace that? What kind of training would you recommend?
Yeah, I think that the training for taking these tough conversations should start with being a bit curious about why is it really difficult and who is it that I'm protecting. I read an interesting study from Ledernes Hovedorganisation a few years back where they asked employees, what do you think is most important traits of your leader? And what came out at the very top was sort of credibility, honesty, being sort of straight with me in terms of how I'm doing. And further down on the list, there was the visionary, coaching, mentoring, all these which are also important. But I was still a little bit surprised, but also happy to see that what really stood out at the very top was I want a leader who levels with me, who's candid with me, who tells me the truth, right? And if we relate that to every relationship we're in, we want people to be honest with us.
Yes.
And for the training,
whether we like it or not,
like it may sting a little bit at first to be told by your husband or your wife or a good friend that there's something that they don't appreciate and you should do it differently. But most of the time, it creates the basis to improve, to become better. And at the end of the day, any employee wants to be better. So I think if you teach the managers to understand who are you really protecting here, you're not doing any good for the employee by not saying what you want, what you mean. So is it really your own resistance? Is it your own sort of aversion towards conflict? Then you need to think about that. You need to embrace it and see it as an opportunity to grow yourself. And then when it comes to the specific conversation, the number one thing is to be prepared. Find out what is it you want to say. What are the situations where you think the employee is doing something that you don't like? Maybe he has a tendency to show up late for basically all meetings. Then you shouldn't say you're coming late for every meeting. You should say yesterday and the day before you came late, and I think it was about 10 minutes late. And then we should talk about, what was the behavior? What was the effect of it? We could not get started. We got delayed with our decision making. The rest of the members of the team also started running out and in the door because they didn't realize the meeting actually started, and now we ended up wasting basically an hour of our time. I would really appreciate if you could come on time or let me know if it's a problem, right? I think if you are very precise in whatever feedback you want to give in terms of what was the situation, what was the behavior, and why was it good or bad, and what would you like to see? Yes. If you can just prepare those 4 simple steps, you can get through with most feedbacks in a good way.
And so does it all come down to the ability to give really great and candid feedback?
I think a lot of it is about giving good feedback combined with communicating clear expectations. I think if I should give leaders 2 simple hacks, it will be clear on what you want
Yeah.
Make sure that you articulate it in a way so the person, whether he's senior or junior or whatever, really understands what is it that you would like. What does good look like? What are your expectations? Spend some time on that also when you delegate tasks or projects. And then give feedback, all the time. This also good feedback, the constructive or the appreciative things that you really like, but also those small things where you feel the person could really lean in here more, or say more here, or change a bit of things here. And request it yourself, because that way it becomes natural. It's not just the manager who sort of sits there and tells people what he thinks. It's also the manager asking, getting the feedback back to acknowledge that I'm also just here to learn and grow. I'm also not perfect. We are all here to do our best. And I would really love to get your feedback so I can improve. I'm going to tell you what I think. You're going to tell me what you think. And you're hopefully also going to tell each other what you think. And if we do that all the time and we make it clear what we want and what we appreciate, what we don't appreciate, magic can happen.
And this now the link to talent and talent management is becoming more and more clear in my mind, and hopefully also the listeners' minds. So the connection between how important it is to grow your managers first and foremost in order to grow your talent.
Yes.
But that's also because you link it to the fact that it needs to be internalized in the organization and not detached.
Yeah. You really need to make sure what is, again, coming back to the expectation, what is it you want out of this program? What should the leaders be better at when they come back? And you should set those expectations clear. And the more you can embed the processes, the tools, the concepts from the organization into the program, so they actually teach and learn what they have to use in the organization, the better. And the only way you can do it is to blend, if you have external facilitators, to blend it with great minds from the organization. And coming back to the leader's role, you need to make sure that when that leader comes back, that his or her leader is ready to take them in, ask them, great, now you have been on this program. What did you learn? How can we apply it? How can we teach it to the rest of the team? How can we ensure that we get the full benefit from this training? Exactly. And that's also why it's so important what they learn is in line with what we do. Because if they go out on a great program, they come back with tools and ways of doing things that are not super 100% aligned with how we do it, then it will just be confusion. And you will not have that consistent culture. Whereas if you have a program that is 100% aligned and in line with the way we do stuff, then you'll have someone who's even better at having tough conversation, who's better at setting expectations, who's better at giving feedback, and is following the same principles, the same sort of process as the way everyone else in the company does it. And that's basically how you build a culture, by having behaviors that are consistent and aligned across the organization.
And I think you made it very, very clear what the connection between talent management and great management is.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good way of ending this.
Yes.
So thank you so much for stopping by today, Dion. And for anyone who would like to read any of your books, we'll make a link in the comment section. Yes. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the Work in Progress podcast on people and culture. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share on social media. For more resources on people, culture, and working in a modern world, please visit getsession.com and check out our articles, guides, webinars, and more. Thanks for listening.